Hello and welcome to This Week at the Movies. I'm Matt.
And I'm Eric.
And if you hear the sound of thunder, it is not me trying to do special effects for this week's movie of Twisters. It is the state of Colorado trying to enact the movie Twisters. We've had everything short of actual landspout tornadoes on the ground. A few cities up to the north of us got obliterated by hail. We are under like a flash flood warning. It is the middle of July and it was 59 degrees at 1 p.m.
It's raining here.
Yeah.
I've got rain.
Yeah.
No, I hope it's safe.
I mean, there was earlier today, I just decided to take a nap because, big news from the news world. And then I had thunder that shook the foundations of my house. And I was like, I'm going to go take a nap to rest up for the impending apocalypse. But I am excited that we are going to talk about the biggest new release this week, and that is Twisters, which will then lead us to looking at the movie that inspired it, the 1996 film Twister, and also look at the expanded summer for one of the stars, Glen Powell, who was in another Netflix film called Hitman. Eric, it was a very stormy Glen Powell-y week. What were you more excited about, the big storms or Glen Powell?
Honestly, Glen Powell. And then I saw Twister, the movie, and then I got really excited, and I think that shot my expectations up too far. Spoiler alert.
Well, we will start with the reason why we're all here, which is Twisters, which, has been, the original film came out in 96, so it's been 28 years. This sequel has the same idea in that they are chasing tornadoes in Oklahoma during a historic outbreak. And you might say, how often is there a historic outbreak? Well, let me tell you, watching the weather news the last few years, it seems like there is a historic outbreak every year of wild weather.
So chasing him.
Yeah, so maybe it's possible. This one comes from Lee Isaac Chung, who did Minari, a very different kind of a movie that was a Best Picture nominee a few years ago. Features Daisy Edgar Jones, who you will recognize from various projects, including one of my personal favorites of the small screen, the miniseries Normal People. And Glen Powell, who's been in everything of late, was in Top Gun 2, and Anthony Ramos. So those are kind of the three big stars. Although this one is populated with a lot of familiar faces. We get Maura Tierney, Sasha Lane, Daryl McCormack, briefly, Kiernan Shipka. Yep. David Corenswet aggressively chewing gum as he prepares to be Superman. So there is a whole lot of action in here, but what you really come for are the tornadoes. There is some plot. There are some plot elements, and we maybe talk about that a little bit more. I know you had some strong thoughts on this one. I will start by saying I'm giving this movie thumbs up. And I kind of want to hear your thoughts because there is something that occurred to me with this movie and how it relates to Twisters, the same way I felt about another film franchise relating to one of my favorite films from growing up. Because if you followed me for a while, Twisters, I'm a big disaster film person. It is not Ghostbusters. Oh. I'm a big disaster film person in general. I used to watch a lot of these with my mom. I made my wife watch Poseidon right before we went on our cruise. Rude. I own Volcano. Unironically, just watching Volcano, for fun. But Twisters is actually one of my favorite movies. It is in my top 50 movies of all time. It is pretty near and dear to me. I remember seeing it when I saw it in high school. So I was kind of leery, wasn't sure I liked the idea that they were making another one, period. There are some movies that maybe don't need to. So I was pleasantly surprised by this one, but I had kind of a thought. But first, I know it did not, you had never seen Twisters until, was it Friday?
Yeah, no, I had not seen Twister until early Saturday.
So you saw them almost literally back to back.
Yep. Which is a trip, I will tell you what. For it to dive that hard back into looking at that satellite image that they have to just really show you where 1996 CGI was at. Um, you know,
Well, and you know how they did the storms for 1996?
how?
They did something I remember, like with pantyhose and making
Oh,
loops and adding stuff in there because, I mean, they didn't have the computer effects
see,
that they
that's
can do
the
now. So
thing.
I knew the spectacle. You expect the spectacle is going to be better in Twisters, and I think it kind of was.
I Here's the thing: we have an embarrassment of riches, and I'll talk about this all the time. If I haven't started talking about it yet, you'll hear me talking about it a lot soon, especially with Marvel movies and Deadpool coming up and all that. We have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to blockbusters. Okay, technically, Twisters is an amazing visual achievement, is really well constructed, really well acted, a very strong like emotional performances from likable enough actors playing characters who care about what they're doing. I literally, if we hadn't seen well over 100 movies in the last 2 years alone with special effects on par with this movie, I may have felt differently about it. But taking this jarring trip back to 1996 and seeing things like that, like you're saying with the pantyhose, having to do unique, unconventional, bizarre thinking things. When I watch Twister, a friend of mine was watching it at their house when I went later. So I got to actually watch it 1.5 times in one day. And one of the times we're watching it with the sound off, and I'm realizing how much forethought had to go into piecing together shot for shot. She's like, we're going to hide in this warehouse, and a piece of the roof is going to fall down, and then a small thing, and then a CGI blade is going to fly through the screen, and then there's wind blowing on an actor in a close up. Just how directionless and insane that would have to be to not just be able to be pre-visualized and put it out. It feels like such an impressive achievement that it comes together as well as it does. And then Twisters, in contrast to that, feels like a movie is doing what other movies do, just doing a good job because we do a good job because, and I hate being that person because I don't ever think that good special effects are just like boring. I don't like when people try and say, oh, it's just in a computer so I can tell it's fake. It's like, no, I believe in being swept away by any kind of special effects, visual or special or anything like that. It's just, there is something special and unique about Twister that even with the parts of it that are aging, like those aged parts of it still make it stand out, probably in different ways than it did when it came out, but still. I just can't see how Twisters, I would pick it out of a crowd of blockbusters. Like if I want to watch something that seems like ominous and like looking to the skies and desert swept sometimes or in like a field, I'm going to go with Jordan Peele's Nope. And that's just like a personal thing. Like I feel like there are vibes from this movie that I can get from that movie. And if I want to watch Glen Powell, I can watch Top Gun Maverick. I don't feel. And then if I want to watch Twister, I can watch Twister. So I don't feel what Twisters brought to the table that made it anything special. I'm neutral on this. I don't think it was bad or anything like that. It's just in Twister 1996, there is a scene where Jamie Gertz, Dr. Melissa Reeves, the characters are in a horrible place. It's when Lois Smith, Meg Green's, her house
Yeah,
has been
Meg.
like wrecked, and they're all in there, and everybody is distraught. And he's going up to Bill Paxton is coming up to her, and he's saying, "Hey, she's like, I'm gonna go back to the hotel," and he's like, "Great, I'll come and get you later." She's like, "I'm not gonna be there," and it's because even though they're in this horrible, like low place where disaster has struck, she says, "I can't even begin to compete with that." Because a part of her knows, and a part of it is there in Bill Paxton's performance, that he's extremely passionate and drawn to that chaos and tornadoes. And I just don't see any of the spark of that kind of spark in the characters in this movie. Not that the characters have to be the same, but just I kind of expected a little bit more, I think, from the Glen Powell and the Tornado Wrangler side of things, and I don't know what was missing. I feel bad for not feeling more excited about this movie. It's just where I'm at.
Yeah, and there are so many, iconic scenes in Twister when they have that exchange. That's after the one had come and ripped through the drive-in movie theater where it was showing The Shining. Just kind of an iconic look, and and where they
Here's
have to
Johnny.
go, yeah, where they have to go down, and it's structured differently. So what one criticism I will level at Twisters is a lot has been made about the trying to do a love triangle, which there is very much kind of a love triangle in the first one because Bill Paxton's character shows up thinking he's getting divorced, that his relationship with Joe is not salvageable and seems to have moved on. Kind of not only moved on, but in all of his choices, that's talking about shiny new Chuck, a shiny new safe job, a shiny new safe relationship. In all ways, he's been trying to move away from that hurt. But in this new one, I never really perceived until you get to like the end that they were even trying to make a love triangle, because at no point in time does Kate seem interested in Anthony Ramos's character as anything more than kind of a friend. And I don't even know how close of friends they are. I mean, you're led to believe they haven't talked in 5 years. I guess I could understand that he might be infatuated with her, but when we first meet them, even though they had a pre-existing relationship, she's very clearly with somebody else. And if you're trying to tell me the love triangle was between Glen Powell and a ghost, maybe I would have bought that more. But they build some very natural spark and chemistry between Glen Powell and Daisy Edgar Jones. So, I was bought into that. I kind of like the idea that the three of them might become friends and form a business. They talked about making more movies, but what can you really do with that? What would the tension in that necessarily be? You have seemingly achieved your scientific objectives. You know how to map a tornado, and you have developed something that you think will help kill it. What would be the tension in going forward? I might be interested. I don't know. Sometimes I think it's okay for movies to be what they are, and not every movie needs to be a franchise or have a sequel or get remade. And that's kind of how I felt about Twister. And I will say it's something that struck me about another. So, Twister, famously written by Michael Crichton, who is one of my favorite authors. He worked on it with his wife. It was touched up by a couple of other writers. They don't have the writing credits on it. Um, it made me think of another Michael Crichton property, and that's how I felt when they announced Jurassic World. I love Jurassic Park. And honestly, if you watched the movie Jurassic Park, and I acknowledge Jurassic Park had sequels, and I think they were somewhat unnecessary sequels. One of the few books I've never read all the way through from Michael Crichton is The Lost World, because I was kind of pissed off at the idea. Because if you read Jurassic Park, they make some very clear narrative choices that they have to walk back, largely due to the popularity of the film and a certain actor in the film.
Yeah.
That I find disingenuous. But
Sure.
if I loved Jurassic Park, but if you watch that and if you read Michael Crichton's book, when you start Jurassic World, it's a successful theme park. And that was, to me, antithetical to everything Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park stood for. And I was like, I don't want them to make another one. Making some spectacle where you have a park, it pissed me off watching a trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, this is really horrendous. But then I watched it, and well, I still have some of those misgivings that, Michael Crichton probably would have never conceived of a world where that park could actually successfully function or exist. The new movie wanted to say something different about where we were as a society when it came out, and it's
Mhm.
very much about our commercialization, our drive to make things bigger and better, often, regardless of
Bigger and more cheap.
safety or larger concerns about the world. And it also told a different kind of story with different kinds of characters. And ultimately, that's kind of how I feel about Twisters. I the first one is a little bit about people who are trying to make scientific advancements for the pure love of science versus people who are doing corporate science, and I think that was a big thing in the 90s, and that was always a big theme for, honestly, for Michael Crichton. Is scientific advancement versus corporations controlling scientific advancement or doing whatever, and Carrie Elway's character definitely represents corporations. This one says is a little bit about something different about the world we're in. There is a very real, the kind of people that profit off of loss, living in an area where we have been ravaged by massive storms. We have had so many hail claims in Colorado that now there's a few insurance companies that literally won't offer homeowners and vehicle insurance in this state anymore. There are people that can no longer get insurance that they can afford because we've been so prone to these superstorms that have done so much damage. And the people that profit off that and collect huge swaths of land, I think that is a real thing that they touch on. I also think, uh, again, as somebody that lives in a place where you see storm footage, and some of the storm footage is incredible, but storm chasers, especially the rise of YouTube personalities and the daring, I think that's a very real thing. And they do kind of a good job of touching on where we are a little bit different, in a climate in 2024. The Weather Channel didn't really exist doing 24-hour commercial programming back in the day, but I remember, now you can actually watch these stupid storm shows. Or I made a joke with you about the Shark Week, about the people that are like, hey, a bunch of people just got eaten here, let's dive in the water with some chum and see what happens to us.
Mm.
There's a whole culture now of our entertainment that is just,
Anything for the clicks.
well, you'd almost call it jackass type behavior, as in
Yeah.
the show Jackass, except for they're not perceived as being that kind of dumb, even though that really is about what it is. But it made sense to me a little bit that there was an element of creating a YouTube internet personality in that kind of post Jackass society world where, hey, you outfitted your truck with something that'll anchor you to the ground. You're going to drive right into a tornado, which is the stupidest thing you can do, and see if you can set off a firework.
Yeah.
I mean, so there were elements about it that I thought were updated to reflect
Hmm.
where we
It's
are
just
as a society.
it's just that I wish they made a comment about it other than it exists.
That's true. It doesn't go super super deep into a lot of those things.
It's just that those characters end up
I do
passionate about the
I
lead character's interests.
Well, I say, and that's where I would sort of disagree when you say none of these people would be doing it if they didn't have their kind of job thing. I think for the central three, you learn about Glenn Powell's background the first time he encountered storms and always wanting to be close to it. And a lot of his commercial, larger than life persona, you come to realize, is making money so that they can go help people and provide food for
Yeah,
people, and that they do actually care about people. They get a thrill out of doing it, but so did, I would argue, Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt's characters got a little bit of a thrill out of storm chasing. We know R.I.P.
absolutely.
Philip Seymour Hoffman's character certainly got a
Yeah.
thrill out of storm chasing. And Anthony Ramos and Daisy Edgar Jones, their characters, even after tragic circumstances were still drawn to working in weather and storm prediction. Daisy Edgar Jones' character may not have been able to stay in the field or in Oklahoma after what happened, but she was clearly working for the National Weather Service, watching storms and applying that unique gift and skill toward helping other people. And he, went in and saw some military applications, but wanted to map storms so that they could understand storms better. I mean, his funder was not aggressive gum chewing Superman, might not have been doing it other than to get a paycheck, and the rest of those
Yeah.
chills in his group were kind of doing it to get a paycheck.
Well,
But I that was the difference. I think
it's
Glenn Powell's
not.
big.
Yeah, it's not so much that I think people are doing it for a paycheck or anything. Like I do believe that the characters care about what they're doing. It's just I don't see the characters that is no. And again, this doesn't have to be, but I don't see Philip Seymour Hoffman. Oh, hello.
Hello,
Good
Leo.
evening. Yeah, I don't see Philip Seymour Hoffman. And that he's a character who's like, I'm so sorry.
I don't know.
I know everybody's destroyed, but there's an F5 coming.
Shotgun in the with Glenn Powell. I think it's a little bit
could
like
be.
that. I mean, he was having a good time.
He was, but then he kind of disappears. Like, which I guess Philip Seymour Hoffman's not necessarily there in the.
I mean, if you had a choice between having a wild dude riding shotgun with you or Daisy Edgar Jones, you might also choose Daisy Edgar Jones.
Well, so yeah, like I understand what you're saying, and that's fair. It's just I absolutely had no idea that there was anything like a love triangle or anything like that in Twister. That came out of nowhere. That the opening of the thing is that he's divorcing Helen Hunt. I'm like, why? Where are we going with this? And it's just somehow they did such a great job of Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton seeming so like you mentioned. Bill Paxton's character at the beginning is like someone who's trying to put this life behind him but can't. And the similar to that would be Daisy. Horrible tragedies happen. Now she's trying to live a life away from it, but someone explains to her why she should come back, and she does, and she wants to. But there's just not that weird, exciting kind of can't not kind of quality. I don't know how to explain it.
Well, and did you know that the original Twister was nominated for 2 Academy Awards?
Oh. For what?
One was almost certainly visual effects, but let me see. Sound.
Okay. Oh, sound. Ooh.
Sound and visual.
Yeah.
There are just so we'll dive in. Twisters. I gave it thumbs up. Eric was thumbs neutral. I will, as you might have guessed, the original Twister. When I said that it was in my top 50 films of all time, I would give this one 2 thumbs up. There's a lot of iconic things that I think are funny that from that movie as well. Like when they're going at the end and the first shed they go to hide in, and then you see all like the knives. Yeah. Who are these people? Farmers. Those are like tools. Yeah. But it was just, there are just so many funny and iconic things. The Shining playing in the drive-in, that whole drive-in sequence, where you can feel everything kind of going. They're back and forth with Jonas. Yeah, some of the dialogue, some of it's a little weird, like when a house blows across the street and they drive through it. I mean, some of those things probably. I'm not saying like I think this is the most grounded and in realism film, but it did also have a heck of a cast, beyond Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Jamie Gertz, Carrie Elways is in there. You mentioned Lois Smith as Aunt Meg, Alan Ruck, kind of a fun character actor, Todd Field, who has become a pretty incredible director now. Jeremy Davies was in this movie. Joey Slotnick. I mean, they had a pretty famous like little team there, and this was right in a kind of sweet spot for Jan de Bont as a director too, because he did Twister. The year prior to this, he had done Speed, Uh,
Oh.
so that's a pretty. He only directed 6 films. One was a short, but his first feature film was Speed. 2 years later, he had Twister. Then it kind of went off the rails with Speed too. But
Oh, okay.
you know
I didn't know
that.
the same guy did Speed 1 and 2. Huh.
Yeah, I was rewatching Speed the other day, and I was listening to the musical scoring, and I was like, "This sounds incredibly familiar." It's the same guy that scored Bad Boys, and I swear to God, he used the same score.
Mm,
Put those movies back to back someday.
okay.
Which I almost had them back to back because I was rewatching Speed. We just watched all the Bad Boys movies for Bad Boys 4. So sometimes people steal from themselves.
Sure.
But Twister, I thought it was a completely unique experience. Part of it will always have a special place in my heart because I remember seeing it in theaters, in high school, going and seeing it, and it was a huge, it was an experience.
Hmm.
You obviously didn't see it in theaters, and you've had almost 24 hours to sit with it. So
Yeah. Um, and I'm not gonna lie, that is the greatest car commercial I've ever seen in my life for Dodge Ram.
also a brand new truck. Do you have full coverage on this? No, liability only. Who has liability only on? They wouldn't. No insurance company would allow you to have liability only on a new vehicle you're still making payments on.
It honestly, it transcended product placement to the point that it felt iconic. That, like, I'm never going to look at any kind of Dodge Ram that looks remotely close to that model and not think about Twister. That's I don't know, like that. There is a split second shot in the movie where the windshield of that car gets impaled by some of the debris, and a hole gets punched in the windshield of the car. And then in the next shot, it didn't happen. It's sort of like a jarring edit to kind of show one of the takes where the car took more damage than it was supposed to and keep that in continuity. And it's this. It is. I'm going to be a little bit absurd here, but it's almost like a classical sense of editing where instead of feeling like a mistake, it feels like it is intentionally jarring, minimal kind of like thing to make you think, like something really dangerous is happening. And it, I don't know, like just them driving through an entire house and the car is in the same condition from the front of the house as it is at the back of the house. It's awesome. It's the movie is awesome. Like, I don't know how, like, just Bill Paxton's goofing around on set in a behind the scenes video talking about how this is going to do for tornadoes what Jaws did for sharks. And I'm like, this movie
It
is
kind of did
yeah.
because we've seen. I mean, I will say, I have seen over the years. There have been a ton of like big storm, supercell, tornadic kind of movies. None of them have ever been Twister
That's
or
the
even
thing.
Twisters.
This did come out at a time like, what year was Independence Day?
96. It was the same year.
Same year. Like, we're in the middle of disaster movie blockbusters, and this one is unique. This one is, I think, special in its own way. Again, it is dated. There, like, it's a little too cheesy for me. It's enough for me to keep it from going a full 2 thumbs up. Um, and the score, the musical score, the needle drops, spectacular. I love them. It makes everything feel 90s, but I don't care. That's in the best way out possible. But sometimes the musical score is just too much for what's going on. And again, I had a few other friends the second time I was watching, like, we're talking about that is the way movies kind of were in the 90s. There were operatic, like, telling you how to feel scores in a lot of big movies. And it's true, but there was so much to the sound design when they were letting it be it's that without the music that I feel like it takes something away from the tension of the movie to put too much in the score. So that's really my only issues with it. I love the entire cast. I thought the writing was sharp. Um, and again, it takes a real care for detail and attention to kind of craft the sequences of just an amorphous storm attacking someone. Like the tornado that comes out of the screen at the drive-in is in the dark. You don't see much of it. You don't really have a sense like that the level of attention it takes to make you feel like you have a sense of direction of where the storm is going and when it will have passed. It would be so easy for that scene to just feel like absolute chaos, but they build these massive sets and they are so careful with direction and editing. Like it just works.
I had to look. I couldn't remember how, because I remember Siskel and Ebert made jokes about the dialogue too, because some of them, screaming cow and direction. But it looks like it says he gave it thumbs up. So
Yeah.
I always check Roger Ebert's rankings, but there have been some interesting. This Twisters obviously did pretty well at the box office, which we can't say about some of the movies that we have enjoyed. They said it had the biggest disaster opening since The Day After Tomorrow. I almost forgot about
Oh.
that movie from 2004. I don't know if you ever saw that one.
Oh, I've got it.
The
It
Ice
was
Age
it
comes
was
to
for
Jake
some
Gyllenhaal.
reason it was for some reason a movie that was like safe to show in school. And for some reason I saw it like 2 or 3 times in a classroom. I don't know why. I don't remember the context.
I don't know why either. But I was trying to look. It has been a few years since there's been a good, weather movie. So,
Mm.
but
I will
it up.
never watch Geostorm. I know
No
it's bold to say
Geostorm.
that, but I saw the trailer for that and did something to my memory where everything just felt like a gray haze, and like I just can't, I don't know.
Well, and then there's Into the Storm from 2014.
Hurricane Heist.
There's one on her. Well, that's a hurricane though. There's one called Supercell that's on Hulu right now that I've actually watched. There was one called 13 Minutes. It was not very good, but I enjoy a good disaster movie. I've watched Earthquake. I've watched San Andreas. So sometimes you need these. I'm not. Twister might be the Jaws of tornado movies, though.
It
That's
might be.
I'm thinking about it. It's apt. Well, Glen Powell obviously doing his thing in Twisters. That wasn't his first or his only movie this summer. And earlier in June, we got the release of Hitman, which is loosely based on a true story. Comes from director Richard Linklater, who co-wrote the screenplay with Powell. He takes the lead as kind of an unassuming, everyday college professor named Gary Johnson, who moonlights with the local police when they do a series of stings. And I guess I didn't realize murder for hire was such a big thing, but that part of the story is true. Gary Johnson, there was a real name named Gary Johnson who worked with the police and would pose as the potential hitman when they did stings to catch people on murder for hire. I had fun with this movie. The crazy aspects of the story, including one particular client played by Adria Arjona, named Madison, who he convinces her not to kill her husband, then kind of falls for her, but is stuck playing his hitman persona. And we see how some of that plays out. That is all fictional stuff that they added to Gary Johnson's story to kind of create a more interesting movie. Which I thought that was kind of fun. There's almost, to me, a tale of two films in here. One is the actual stuff they plucked from history, which is Gary Johnson running these stings, and we get to see Glen Powell in a lot of different crazy outfits and adopting a lot of different personas. And then the other half of it is kind of this one very specific story of him falling in love with a woman and sort of maybe making himself and his life a little more exciting.
Mhm.
A guy who maybe needed a little bit of an edge. Um, I had fun with this. I don't think it was incredible. I know some people were very much in love with it. I thought with the title Hitman 2, I initially thought this was going to be a more serious movie until I started watching it. And I'm like, it's a comedy ish.
Yeah.
But I thought it was fun. It is streaming on Netflix now. It premiered at film festivals at the end of 2023, but kind of making its run here in 2024.
I adore this movie. It is weird to call it a comedy because there is a certain level of tension. I would say it is a dramatic ending. And if it wasn't for the stinger of the movie, like telling you, just kidding, these parts are not true. Only this one part is true. Like, feel like the movie gives you permission to like laugh at it more. But that's the thing. I went in absolutely blind. I didn't watch a trailer. I had just heard about it and I knew Richard Linklater and I really like him and I like Glen Powell well enough. Well, I like him a lot more after watching this. Um, he just was really endearing as a character who's just supposed to be kind of an oddball. Like he's like really good at ad-libbing why like how he would get away with murder and trying to seem like a realistic hitman to people. I love the idea of them introducing like you watching this movie. You think hitmen are a real thing? Like that's a very interesting thing to me. Like I'm like I'm sure there are people out there who have killed people for money, but it is interesting that that is probably largely a movie made profession. Like there aren't people who are just contract killers that just live out there and whatnot. But I will say I buy into everything, almost everything, wholeheartedly in this movie, except for Gary Johnson, the person, adopting the persona that he does for to be with this woman, and then having to reconcile not being himself with genuinely wanting to be with this person, and how he sort of adopts a little bit of that fake persona as what he wants to be his real persona. I wish there was a little bit more of something like he comes to the realization that he can do things he couldn't normally do because it helped him with his confidence or something. It feels to me like they sort of glaze over the idea that he has lied profoundly about who he is. And now that he genuinely wants to help this girl, he also has to genuinely abandon some parts of himself to commit to being who he thinks she wants to be with. And I feel like that's sort of is just you're just expected to sort of be like, no, this is who he wants to be and he's happy now. And I just don't feel like they quite earned that. That feels a little bit weird to me. But a hard thumb up.
Yeah, I had fun with it. I'm like you. I not all of it completely worked
Hmm.
for me, but I thought it was fun, and it's going to be curious, to see what Glenn Powell does next. He's had a pretty good run the last couple of years. You mentioned he obviously had a pretty key role in Top Gun Maverick. He was in another movie where he was a pilot that same year called Devotion, which if you haven't seen that, that is I believe it's Korean War set. It's him and Jonathan Majors, which I know brings its own set of
Hmm.
thoughts now, but it's Navy pilots during the Korean War, and I really enjoyed that one. That one is actually on Paramount Plus now, if you haven't seen it. And then
Right.
Anyone But You, kind of a fun romantic comedy, was better than I was expecting. That one's also on Netflix, so some opportunities to see him. He has a few things in production. They are making a Top Gun 3, which I have mixed feelings about. Do you know that he has the lead in a remake of The Running Man?
No kidding.
Yeah, that's one that's in production. And there's one called Monsanto that's in production, which is about a young lawyer, which it looks like that is the character that Glenn Powell plays, taking on the Monsanto uh, company. Looks like a legal film, kind of fight the power legal film. Monsanto made some stuff that poisoned some people with their
Hmm.
byproducts. So allegedly, I will say allegedly, because I don't have enough assets for this podcast to get sued. Uh, but so gonna be curious to see, how he keeps coming with some of these projects. But I've enjoyed. There's
Yeah.
a lot of different. We've seen a lot of different roles and aspects for him, and even in Hitman, one of the things I like is he plays a lot of different styles of character for a while in that montage when he's being different people, which was kind of fun.
That's the thing. Even after Twisters, I would say that with Timothy Chalamet, people might feel differently about this, but between Wonka and Paul Atreides, we know the movie that he's going to be known for iconically at the top of people's heads. With Austin Butler, we know Elvis. Like there's a couple of people where like what made them a star. I'm not sure that we've seen the movie for Glenn Powell yet.
Yeah.
Now Top Gun Maverick was amazing, but that's a Tom Cruise movie. Like that's
Well, and Miles Teller was the second
yeah.
build in there. Even Jennifer Connelly, you'd probably remember them more. I wish more people would have seen Devotion.
Mm.
Honestly, remember during the awards season in 22 watching the screener of that and thinking, hot damn, this is super good. And no one's going to see it because it's another fighter pilot movie in the same year as freaking Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I knew it. I think it got an original song nomination too, and I was like, "Damn, you're competing in the same categories as Top Gun Maverick." But he and Jonathan Majors were so good as these.
I
There's
like
a
to
lot of
imagine someone during the making of Devotion was like, "Man, I think we really got something here. I think we've got the next Top Gun on our hands."
well, and they both had Glenn Powell in them, and so you're
Yeah.
like, dude, it was just your year for fighter pilot movie. But if you've never seen that one, it's on Paramount Plus. I did enjoy that. And then last year because Hitman kind of got it had started. Yeah, I think it played at TIFF in September, but then they decided they weren't going to release it wide to end the year. So really, his only movie was that late December, Anyone But You, where he's opposite Sydney Sweeney, and I think that movie's fun. Some people did not
A
care
lot of
for it.
people did not. I don't know what ratings it has and whatnot, but I steered clear because I heard some scathing, though I can't remember the specifics, reviews of that.
I'm sure it was from Ricky.
Okay. All right.
You know,
Yeah.
like it's not incredible, but not every movie is trying to be high art.
Yeah.
That's is the thing, and sometimes just a romantic comedy, if you're married and you're looking for date night, which is
Mm,
how I got roped into not only seeing it but purchasing it on Vudu after my wife saw a trailer for it,
mhm.
sight unseen. You could do worse.
Okay. Cool.
And they seem to have fun, and I like him. So, but a couple of different kind of movies here. See if he gets a bump for Twisters. I also wish nothing but the best for Daisy Edgar Jones, who, if
Yeah.
you've never seen Normal People, that was devastating. And Paul Mescal seems to have exploded kind of into being a bigger star, and he has Gladiator coming out in the fall. Was really great in that series. She's been good in other things. She was really good in another TV series called Under the Manor of Heaven. That is a guttingly depressing watch that also has Andrew Garfield in it.
Cool.
Um, but
I love Andrew Garfield.
let's see if this maybe this cast will take off a little bit. As much as I appreciated Twisters more than I thought, I will say the whole planned potentially 3-film series that's now been bandied about is maybe more than, I don't know, maybe, but
Yeah. I'm up for if they try and do something with it. I don't know. I want to see something that they're having a little bit more fun with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it for this week. We are ending what has been a very strong month of July in perhaps the most spectacular fashion possible. And next week we will be diving deep into two beloved and iconic Marvel characters as Deadpool and Wolverine finally get the team up that, as he mentions in the trailer, he's waited for years.
The duo of Van Wilder and Van Helsing that I never knew I wanted.
Yes, and if you're like me and you go back to just see every Hugh Jackman as Wolverine film, we will probably look back at his history of Wolverine. You know, he started portraying Wolverine in 2000. During that time, we've seen what, three different
Year
people as
2000.
Superman, three different people as Spider-Man. We've seen at least two Batman. There's
Yep.
only been
We've seen the same person as two
one
different Deadpools.
Wolverine. You know, I forgot how big of a character he is in X-Men Origins Wolverine, and also how bad that movie is.
Yeah.
The only thing I could think during X-Men Origins Wolverine was I was ready for Hard Knocks because Liev Schreiber is the narrator for the Hard
Yeah.
Knocks TV
Okay.
series.
Can you explain to me why Liev Schreiber is just so universally known as having gotten famous somehow for X-Men Origins Wolverine, even though he was in other things? Like,
I don't. That's not the first movie for him that comes to mind. It's ironically him being Cotton Weary in Scream 3, which is another not incredible film.
okay. Okay. See, I wish I thought of Scream 3.
But
I don't know
it's
why.
probably a generational thing.
Maybe, but like everyone I know, it's like Liev Schreiber, like, is awesome, and it's like, okay, great, he's a good actor. Where do you know him from? X-Men Origins Wolverine. Like, what?
Also, he plays Hugh Jackman's older brother in that movie, and I was like, this feels like backwards casting. So I looked him up. He is actually older than Hugh Jackman.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh
But
god.
if you're a football fan, that he's been the voice of Hard Knocks for like over a decade. It's
Okay.
a documentary series that happens every year where they follow teams in training camp. He narrates the whole thing, and there were a couple of line readings he gives in Deadpool or in Wolverine Origins, where I was like, "I'm ready for football season. Where's my Hard Knocks?" So, but we will have some fun. Hopefully, Deadpool and Wolverine will be good. I'm seeing it tomorrow. Eric is seeing it on Saturday, and then we'll be talking
Seeing it
about
tomorrow.
it.
So you see that go at him on Twitter for his review, and then
It will be up
he
on
won't give it to you until the
the embargo breaks on Tuesday afternoon, and
there
everybody
you go.
will have put up not our friend Ricky because he doesn't get to go see it, but the embargo breaks on Tuesday afternoon, so you will start seeing things. So if you want to shield yourself, make sure you kind of
Oh my gosh, yeah.
block and mute because the embargoes will lift and people's reviews will start coming out.
Please just be nice, internet, and don't just spoil everything.
That's the other thing,
Seriously.
you know, if you want to go in with some semblance of mystery, do not watch the new final trailer because they give away a whole bunch of more stuff. I mean, I know it's a 2 hour and 12-minute movie, so there's things we haven't seen yet, but there can't be that many things we haven't seen yet.
Well, okay, so I don't know how big this movie is supposed to get, but from what I can tell, we've seen pretty much 3 set pieces and some sprinkled footage in between. That's the fight in front of the 20th Century Fox logo, the fight in a van in a car between him and Wolverine, and when they meet Cassandra Nova in Paul Rudd's giant skull. So
It's nice to know he finally aged.
So unless the movie has very few locations, I think they've done a phenomenal job of keeping a lot of the movie out.
Yeah.
But
well, and there's going to be
see.
a lot of cameos and there's going to be a lot of surprise characters. I just hope it's fun, man.
Yep.
So it is our big Marvel film for the year. So
the one,
because I'm not counting Madam
don't talk
Web
to me
or
about
Kraven
Kraven.
the Hunter or what is it?
Horse Venom.
Venom. On that cheery note, if you want to get blown away, Twisters is in theaters, Twister is on Max, and Hitman is on Netflix. And that'll do it for us this week. And until next week, we'll see you at the movies.